Good evening, everyone. It gives me immense pleasure to welcome you all to today's webinar organized by Gold Dot Foundation on the topic Indian Defense Industry. Today, on 22nd February, we have gathered here to gain deeper insights into one of the most significant sectors contributing to our nation's strength and self-reliance. The objective of this webinar is to create awareness about the defense industry in India and to understand the history and growth of this vital sector. As India moves steadily towards Atmanirbhar Bharat, the defense industry plays a crucial role in technological advancement and national security and economic development. We are truly honored to have with us our esteemed speaker, Atul Chandra. Mr. Atul Chandra is an award winning international journalist who has won three prestigious journalism awards and has been nominated 6 times. He is presently serving as a consultant technology editor with the Singapore based Asian Defence Technology. He has also contributed to over a dozen highly reputed aerospace and defense publications worldwide. His vast knowledge and experience in defense and aerospace journalism makes him the perfect guide for today's session. Sir, we are grateful for your presence and look forward to your valuable insights. I warmly welcome all the participants and request everyone to actively engage in this informative section. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Kanishka, for your very kind introduction. I'm really glad to be here, for this talk with the Golden Heart Foundation. I hope the information and the insights you get here will allow you guys to follow your passions. Aviation has been mine. I've been very fortunate and blessed to be able to make it a career. If you do what you love, then you never have to work for another day in your life. So I encourage you to sort of explore the avenues where you will be happiest in your work life and in your career. Without much further ado, India has, a phenomenally large and growing defense industry. We are one of the largest armed forces in the world, so we require the latest and the best equipment for our brave men and women who operate and who work with Indian Armed Forces. The talk is meant to give you guys an overview, a little bit of history. Perspective is everything in life. So I'm going to give you a perspective about where we've come from in India with regards to our industry, where we're going. We're living in an era of rapid technological change. Artificial intelligence will change almost everything. Like, the older people like me will remember 30, 40 years back when computers first emerged, when internet and all, Word, Excel, PowerPoint, the same way AI will change the discourse. But for today, this is just a quick overview of all of you. There is a perception sometimes that India is slightly behind the technology curve, and that's not accurate, as we will explore over the course of this discussion. So we'll quickly move into the slides. Okay. So this is something I want to share with you. We'll just spend maybe 5-10 minutes with on these slides. Aviation has transformed the world as we know it. It's one of the most high technology industries on the planet. It has allowed you and your family members to travel tens of thousands of kilometers to foreign countries. In COVID, you saw precious vaccines were able to again travel thousands of kilometers and come to places of need. Now, aviation in its modern sense began in 1903 when the Wright brothers flew for the first time. Now, what this slide shows you is very, very quickly, within just about 7 years, the first flying machine was here in India in 1910. You can go back and read up. The Maharaja Bhupinder Singh of Patiala was an extremely wealthy man, and he purchased, two of these aircraft, and this was the first instance of aeroplanes coming to India. That was not all. Again, within 7 years, the first flight took place in India of an aircraft. It's the equivalent today of, maybe the latest technology like the AI summit that we had, right? So something really new coming to India very, very quickly. So this was the first flight of an aeroplane in India. Again, you have another one, and this took part in UP. We'll come closer home as we go along, but this gives you an understanding that aviation, which is a vital component of the defense industry, has very, very early beginnings in India. You'll also see why it's important as our PPT progresses. So this is Henry Piquet, and if he flew a French aircraft called a Blériot in UP, 1910. Now, we made a lot of progress, right? With the world's first aerial post, right? Things that we take for granted today. Now, this also happened in India for the first time. It didn't happen in the UK. It didn't happen in Britain. Allahabad to Naini was the first time 6,500 letters carried over an 8 kilometer distance, right? So aviation was here very, very early in India. And now, very importantly, just 110 years ago, 15 years ago, we had our first aviation engineer. So when people tell you, oh, all these technologies came abroad first and came to India much later, that's not true. Within a decade of an aircraft first flying a heavier than air aircraft, you had Venkata Subbasetti. He was from Mysore, and he became India's first aeronautical engineer. So just goes to show India and Indians have always been at the cutting edge of aviation. Within about a decade, we had aviation here in India, and you can see he was working for one of the early aeroplane companies. He came back to India. He wanted to build aircraft in India as well, but unfortunately, he died a little early. Now, this is very important because Tamil Nadu is involved here, and you can see Madras, the old name. Now, this was the beginning of commercial airmail services. Again, India was the first here, and you see this long flight from Karachi to Ahmedabad to Bombay to Bellary, and then to Madras, where Tata's today they've taken back control of Air India, and it was Mr. Tata who flew this Pusmat along with another gentleman. So this shows you the early beginnings of aviation in India. You can see there it says congratulations, first flight from Madras to Bellary. And Bellary is of course quite famous now as a mining town, but it was also an important, a stopover point for aircraft. Those days, the early aircraft could not fly for long ranges. Okay, and now we move on. So what I've shown you is aviation, which is at the cutting edge of engineering, of technology, had early beginnings in India. But where did our defense industry actually start? Now, India, of course, has a famous military culture. We've got the Cholas, we've got, Shivaji, we've got the Mughal Empire, we've got, in Karnataka was famous. Mysore was where the first military rocket, was flown. Wood steel was also famous from India. It was the best sort of steel in which you could make swords, and it went all across the world. But modern military industry in India began in 1775 when the British authorities said they will establish an ordnance factory. Now, ordnance basically is all forms of explosives and armament. Everything is clubbed under the term ordnance, right? So this came in 1775. Now, again, if you look back to history, this is an early entry of a modern way of military manufacture, of a modern way of industry that came to India. Just a couple of years, a decade later, in 1787, a gunpowder factory was established. We started production in 1791. And then in 1801, a gun carriage factory. A gun carriage factory is basically for the artillery cannons. Now, this was made at Kosipur in Kolkata. And then the gun and shell factory was started in 1802. So this was the first industrial establishment of um, defense equipment. It was the modern manufacture, the modern techniques that came in about 200 years ago, 250 years ago. Why is this important, right? These ordnance factories, we had about 18 of them before independence in 1947. We established 23 more after independence to meet the needs of the Indian Armed Forces. Now, all of you know, we got independence, about 75 years ago, 80 years ago. And at that time, India was impoverished because of colonization. A lot of our industry had been demolished. So we made use of these existing ordnance factories, and these helped us to arm ourselves quickly. As you know, we had conflict in Kashmir, and then just about 15, 20 years later, we started having over a decade-long period from 1962 to 1971. We had 3 wars, one with China and 2 with Pakistan. So these ordnance factories were crucial for Indian defense industry. The reason I'm sharing this with you is in 2021, a very important transformation happened, and these ordnance factories were corporatized by the government of India. Now, this essentially made them, much more competitive, much more agile, and unlike earlier, where they were not expected to export, they largely had a captive audience. In 2021, the government said, you guys now have to be more competitive and merged these 41 ordnance factories, establishments, or manufacturing units were transferred to seven institutions. You can see them here: Munitions India Limited, Armored Vehicles Nigam Limited. Now, Armored Vehicles Nigam Limited is in Avadi. I hope I have the pronunciation correct. And that's where, tanks of the Indian Army are manufactured. You have Advanced Weapons and Equipment, Troop Comforts Limited, Yantra Indian Limited, and India Optel. India Optel makes optical sights for night vision devices, and you have Gliders India Limited. Now, of course, we require a large number of parachutes and different kind of items, which Gliders India makes, right? So this is an important transition for our defense industry. These ordnance factories, which had their origin more than 200, 250 years ago, and existed and helped arm our defense industry over the last 50, 60, 70 years. It's now been corporatized, and these entities are far more agile, have modern manufacturing processes, modern management processes, and they are an important step forward for us. If you're looking to work in the defense sector, it's important for you to understand that these are some of the most crucial Indian defense establishments from a production standpoint is considered. Now, this is something that I wanted to share with you guys, right? Who does the defense industry supply to, right? Why do we, what, where does all the stuff that they make go to? Now, typically, you only have three pillars to which our defense industry contributes. You have the armed forces: Army, Air Force, Navy, and Coast Guard. These come under the Ministry of Defense. Now, the Army, Air Force, Navy, and Coast Guard are meant for actions outside Indian borders. So they will undertake offensive actions outside India's borders to keep us safe. The Army will undertake ground operations. If they're undertaking something with air, then they'll be supported by the Air Force. The Indian Air Force is tasked with protecting our airspace. That's airspace within the country if somebody intrudes, and airspace outside our country to keep it safe. You have the Indian Navy, which is tasked with protecting our shores, and we have, I think almost about 8,000 kilometers of coastline. So you have the Indian Navy for that. And you have the Indian Coast Guard, which basically works closer home, right? So when someone tells you, okay, what are the different types of armed forces or military forces that India has, then we have this structure, which is the armed forces, which is one. They come under the Ministry of Defense. You have also the Central Armed Paramilitary Forces. Now, these come under the Ministry of Home Affairs. You have the Border Security Force, you have the CRPF, you have the CISF, you have the Indo-Tibetan, Border Police, you have the SSB, Sahastra Seema Dal, and you have Assam Rifles, right? The BSF protects our borders. The CRPF is used for internal security. The CISF is used to protect critical infrastructure. ITBP has a clear role with the China border, with Tibet. SSB has Bhutan and Nepal, and they take care of that part of protection. And the Assam Rifles, of course, is in the northeast, and these take the load off the armed forces. And of course, then you have the police forces. So India's defense industry or acquisitions we make for the defense industry typically go into these three pillars: the Army, Air Force, Navy, and Coast Guard, the paramilitary forces, and of course, the police forces. Any questions as of now? I'm going to assume that's a no.
Yeah, no, no questions.
Okay, right. So we've established aviation came to India early, within a decade of the first flight of a heavier than air aircraft. The ordnance factory is introduced about 250 years ago, modern defense manufacturing, the industrialized age. But this is the important part, and what has been key to the growth of our defense industry. You can say it began in the 1940s. and started with the creation of Hindustan Aircraft Limited in Bangalore. That's a picture that we've got. That's the main gate. Actually, if you travel by Airport Road and you look to that side, you will still find this gate even today with pretty much the same design. Now, Bangalore was a decision, was the beneficiary, right, of the Mysore state's um, uh, desire and intent to invest in aviation. Aviation has always been considered a very important part when a nation wants to industrialize. And thanks to that vision, the government of Mysore at that point, the Diwan of Mysore, Mirza Ismail, and he with Walchand Hirachand. Now, those of you who don't know Walchand Hirachand, he was a famous industrialist in the 40s. Premier Automobile, those of you who like your cars, he also set up Premier Automobiles at that point of time. And one day, while going in an aircraft, he met an American industrialist and they said, look, let's start an aircraft factory. So this was set up in 1940, right? So just about less than 40 years from the flight of the first modern aircraft, this was set up in HAL. As we go through the PPT, you'll realize the importance of these institutions and why South India in particular, Tamil Nadu, Karnataka, Kerala, and even now Hyderabad, Telangana are so important for our aviation industry. So this was our first aircraft factory. In 1941, the government of Mysore bought a one-third stake by investing rupees 25 lakh rupees. A solid sum of money is a large amount of money, but they wanted Indians to be able to work with high technology at that point of time. It's important to note, those days, it is said we didn't even make our own cycles. These were British technology, so making an aircraft at that point was a huge step forward. Now, to enable this, today you hear about state governments offering land to companies to make data centers and AI infrastructure and SEZ. Well, a similar thing was done at that point of time. 700 acres of land free of cost was given to create Hindustan Aeronautics. Water and electricity was provided at a concessional rate to get this factory up and going. And of course, I'm sure all of you are aware that was also the time when World War II was raging around the world. Okay. And so quickly, right? Things move very, very fast. And we had our first aircraft, the first aircraft built in India. The first military aircraft was built in 1941, even before independence. And these aircraft were used for the war effort. These were used for the World War II effort. These are pictures. The main picture, which says first flight of Halo, actually shows Bangalore Airport. This is the old Bangalore Airport. Some of, I'm sure Senthil would know that this airport was functional before the new Bangalore Airport became functional. So they made a lot of aircraft for the war effort here. And it grew very, very quickly within just 3 years. As World War II, really reached its peak. It employed 5,000 Indians. This was a massive benefit for India at that point of time, which due to British rule had been left behind in terms of technology. It created a mass of skilled labor, skilled workforce, confident in their abilities. And there you see Mr. Walchand, is here at the factory with American executives. 5,000 Indians were employed at that point of time. And of course, the engines as well, very, very powerful military engines were also repaired and overhauled here. Interesting picture for those of you who visit Bangalore. Bellandur today is famous for having all the IT parks, but earlier and small parts of the lake still exist. There was a large tank and the HAL was built there simply because they used to service and repair seaplanes that would come from Burma that were fighting, in that sector of World War II. They would land in the tank, roll up to the concrete, jetty, and then be taken into HAL for overhaul and service. So this is a lovely image of that old history that we have of our aeronautical industry helping and aiding in the World War II effort. This was the Japanese that we were fighting with in the Northeast. Now we quickly transitioned, we gained independence, and you can see how quickly, right, within just a few years, we also had our own aircraft, the HT-2. If you watch the Air Force Day parade, which happens in October every year, The Indian Air Force has actually restored a HT-2 aircraft now. It's an 8-year aeroplane that they're flying. And this aircraft was built by Indians, designed by an Indian, and flown within just a few years of independence, a massive achievement at that point of time, right? So sanctioned in October 1948, drawings were ready by 1950, the first flight in August 1951. Now, this aircraft even flew in Tamil Nadu. You had a base in Tambaram, which I'm sure some of you may be aware, and the HT-2 even flew there until 1989. We quickly moved on. This is the jet age now. So we had the HT-2 in 1948, and we had the Marut. Marut means wind. Now this was a very, very famous aeroplane that we designed. As you can see, very sleek. If you talk to the elders in your family, they will tell you, in India, where owning a cycle was a huge achievement. There were no television sets at that point of time for a country which was so young, so new, to develop such a sleek looking fighter plane, an amazing achievement. And this was the HF-24 Marut. HF stands for Hindustan Fighter. HT was the Hindustan trainer. So HT-2, that was the second aircraft design they chose. And HF-24 was the first Indian fighter, sanctioned in 1956, and it flew in 1961. So really an amazing achievement. And the first batch of aircraft were delivered to the Indian Air Force in 1964. We continue with this proud legacy today with the Tejas light fighter, which is built, in Bangalore, and also a new production line is now underway in Nashik. If some of you come to Bangalore, you will find a road connecting Old Madras Road and the old airport road, and it's called Suranjan Das Road, and that is named after Wing Commander Suranjan Das. In the photo, you will see a gentleman with white overalls and a black band near his knees. He's standing next to Defense Minister Krishna Menon. Now, Wing Commander Suranjan Das's aircraft crashed, and unfortunately, he died in that accident. So the road was named in his honor. So it's called Wing Commander Suranjan Das Road. So there are a lot of sacrifices, a lot of things that the nation has undergone to create its defense industry. We made a number of aircraft for a newly independent nation. You can see one, two. Now here's a third, right? And this also flew very quickly. In the early 60s, the first aircraft delivered to the Air Force in March 1968. Upgrade aircraft in 83. The Kiran still flies, by the way. You will see it at, again, Flight Instructor School, Tambaram. The Surya Kiran, our famed Indian Air Force display team, flies the Kiran jet. It's an amazing aeroplane. It served the nation for so long, and really a phenomenal and an extremely tough design. So you can see the growth of our defense industry, very, very rapid from the late 40s to the early 60s. Now, you can't manufacture aircraft, you can't have a defense industry without quality academia, right? Academic institutions are crucial for the defense industry, for any high technology industry, really. IIT Chennai has done some fantastic work over the years. In Bangalore, we have IISc. IISc is unique because it was the first institution in India that allowed you to study aeronautical engineering. Before that, you had to go all the way to England. And please remember, those days people went by ship, right? Aircraft vessel relatively new. So you would take a very long time to even go and come back. So IISc, the Indian Institute of Science, set up its aeronautical engineering department in December 1942. So we have a very early, strong base in aeronautical engineering, and that core, in Bangalore with IISc, you had IITs supporting, you had a lot of academia institutions supporting the IISc. If you see the picture, the black and white picture, which has the buildings, you'll see a circular structure, and then you see something like an arrowhead shape. That's the wind tunnel at IISc, where they use to test aerodynamics. Okay, just checking on the time. Okay, we're doing okay with time. So you see a picture, the first batch, August 1947. The India you live in is dramatically different from this. You live in an India with immense opportunities and potential, but a lot of the generation before had to fight for these kind of things that you all take for granted today: quality education, access to the best infrastructure, access to wonderful teachers. It was difficult those days because a lot of it was dependent on Great Britain. right? So, Sir M. Visvesvaraya, and you can see the, I'm not going to read it out. I'm sure you can read it for yourself, but the importance of aeronautical and metallurgical science in research and engineering. It's really, the defense industry is absolutely crucial for a modern industrialized nation. Okay. Now this is very interesting, right? This was, a hydrogen manufacturing, uh, plant that they had at IISc. So again, it shows you how high tech, we used to be, and this was forgotten for a long time. So this is at IISc Bangalore. You had this gentleman, who came and set this up. One second. Okay. So another important part. So I hope you can see the trend, the chronology here is showing you how the aeronautical industry grew in South India, in Bangalore. It, of course, proliferated to other parts of our country as well. Now you have the National Aerospace Laboratories, which was also set up very, very early. You see the early logos here. This is 1959 with Dr. P. Neelakantan, very, very famous man, brilliant man who set up NAL. That was their first office. And, they were actually used before being given to NAL, were actually used as stables for the Maharaja's horses, right? So fantastic history, fantastic trivia. Newly independent India didn't have a lot of money to build, fantastic buildings. So they made do with what they had. And this was the National Aeronautical Laboratories. They undertake a lot of theoretical work for our aerospace and defense industry. This is the Kodihalli campus. Now, if you're traveling on Old Airport Road, then you will see the NAL entrance, and then just after that, you'll see the ISRO entrance as well. So this is where they got up NAL. And very, very importantly, there's also a road called Wind Tunnel Road, and this was an important wind tunnel for all the theoretical work that was required. Now, the wind tunnel required water for cooling, and so it was built near the lake. Here you can see it, right? This is the site plan. That's the old airport road. Old airport road. You can see the Chalagatta Lake. You can see Belandur Tank, and then you can see the wind tunnel. Wind tunnel center. Here. So just to give you a sense of how important and crucial these industries were and their location, because HAL was close by. Again, it made sense to locate NAL next to HAL. Very, very important from a defense industry history perspective. Bharat Electronics, the mother of defense electronics in India, right? Really, BL has done so much to get this electronic industry going in our country. Established in 1954 in Jalahalli in Bangalore. You can see, diodes and transistors. This is really old stuff, right? But the next facility came much later, 2 decades later in Ghaziabad. BL is huge, of course, if you come to Bangalore and even in Tamil Nadu, in most Indian states. Now, um, many of you young people, you will see Aero India and you'll say, look, I want to come to Aero India. This is where all the aircraft come. This is where the defense industry comes. There's lovely, interesting trivia here as well. Aero India, the base, Air Force Station Yelahanka, was built by Italian prisoners that were based in Bangalore during World War II. During fighting, the Indian soldiers were part of the British, of the Allied effort, and 130,000 Italian prisoners were taken. Many of them came to India, and they were kept in India 1941, 1946. 8 of these camps were located in Bangalore: Jakkur, Hebbal, and Jalahalli. Now, Jakkur is famous for the Flying Club. Hebbal, of course, you all know, and Jalahalli is where you have the Air Force Technical College today. So the prisoners would walk from their camps and build Air Force Station, build the runways for the Air Force Station. Now, Yelahanka, of course, is vitally important. Its presence as an Air Force base helped our early defense industry because you had trained manpower, qualified pilots, and they worked closely with HAL. Just some trivia. It's an important base. That's an old picture of Air Force Station Yelahanka. I hope you young people have come to the air show. If you've not, you should. It will give you a great understanding of our defense industry. Okay. And another important part is ISRO. All the necessary components for our defense industry. Now, ISRO, of course, is a commercial entity, but they do put up satellites. The high technology that they work with also has offshoots into our industry. I'll also explain to you at the end of the talk why it's important that you understand where our space program is headed. Again, look at how early we started our space program, 1962, right? And then that was INCOSPA, the Indian National Committee for Space Research. And later, this became ISRO, the Indian Space Research Organization, and it was brought under the Department of Space, so directly under the central government, which really gives it great access to the government. And they've achieved so much for our nation. There's some interesting trivia. Professor Satish Dhawan, he was in Caltech, which is such a famous, phenomenal educational institution. And when Dr. Vikram Sarabhai passed away suddenly, Prime Minister Indira Gandhi called him and said, please come back to India for the space program. But look at what he said. I will come back only if I'm allowed to continue as a director of IISc. So the importance of IISc as an educational institution, as an aeronautical and aviation hub, also spilled over into IISc. Now, Professor Satish Dhawan is really a phenomenal individual. If you go to Caltech even today, he is mentioned there with a handful of other, very, very important alumni from Caltech. So really, we're very, very lucky to have someone like him to get our space program off the ground. I wanted to show this to you to see how far your nation has come. This is India's first satellite spacecraft, as it says, Aryabhatta, named after famous mathematician, astronomer. Now, this was built in Pune. Any of you who come to Bangalore, Pune is an industrial area. It was built there. You can see a bullock cart transporting our first satellite. All parts of our industry came together for this to happen. You had HAL, so you had knowledge of aerospace. You had ISRO, knowledge of space. You had IISc for all the research work to be done. You had IIT Chennai. You had so many different organizations that all came together to put India's first spacecraft into space. That's not all, right? Defense is really an ecosystem, and it has important spin-offs, right? It's important to understand that investments in the defense industry have spill-offs into other sectors as well. Now, if you take the US example, the internet was developed for military purposes. It was called ARPANET, and then it became, commercial, became the internet. GPS, global positioning satellite systems, were developed for the military, and then they were made open for commercial use. A lot of your technologies, typically the world's first computer, ENIAC, was also designed, to calculate the trajectory of artillery shells. So a lot of military technologies end up flowing into the commercial domain. And the reason I'm putting this here is Electronic City in Bangalore, which is famous for electronics, famous for our IT boom. The person who founded it, or the person who was one of the key people in its creation, actually worked in BL for 15 years, right? And then he was the head of the Karnataka State Electronics Development Corporation, Kionics, right? And he wanted to create an electronic state, and he was chairman of Kionics. And he made a proposal. He said, we should set up an electronic city in 1979. How do we equate this? This is the equivalent of data centers coming up in India today, AI infrastructure coming up in India today, something absolutely new that is being done for the first time. So this was the first time that we had a space for electronic companies, and the chief minister, agreed for it. And 20 kilometers south of Bangalore city, on the way to Hosur, you had Electronic City, which came up in 1979. And we know how Electronic City and the IT industry has changed India's trajectory, India's perception, and given confidence to so many Indians working in the sector to move on into other things. Okay, I think I've only got about 20 minutes left, so maybe I'm going to jump to another angle now. I've taken you through the history. You now, I am hoping, have an understanding of the components of our defense sector. One very, very important challenge with the defense industry is the exorbitant cost of modern defense equipment. right? If I want to give you a comparison, if your family bought a Maruti car in 1995, that car would have costed about rupees 2.5 lakh to 4 lakh rupees. And today, if you want to buy an Alto, 30 years later, the Alto would cost you maybe between 6 to 7 lakh rupees, right? But in the defense industry, the costs, they're not an exact comparison. I'll explain why, but it just gives you the challenges for spending. Now, here you see some numbers. The MiG-21, the original one, the old one, 3.3 crores. The MiG-21s we acquired, in the early 70s, 1.46 crore. The new MiG-21 BISs, which came in the 80s, built by HAL by 10 crore. And then you see the price going up. Aircraft that came in the 80s, like the MiG-29, 91 crore. The Jaguar, again built in Bangalore, 94 crore. The Mirage 2000, very, very famous aeroplane, 129 crore. But today, the Rafale is about $100 million, 100 million euros a piece, and that pegs it at about 800 to 900 crore for one aircraft. For your understanding, it's not only the acquisition cost of the aircraft, it's not only the purchase cost. We also have something called life cycle costs. The simple example, if your family buys a car or a bike, what does it cost for you to maintain that car or bike for 10 years, right? Or longer. Now, typically we operate these aeroplanes for 30 to 40 years. And so if you spend about 800 crores buying it, you will spend 2.5 times, that is about 3,000 crores or 2,000 crores in maintaining it, upgrading it over a 30-year lifespan. That's very, very expensive. You've all heard of a Rafale deal that is due to happen very soon, and we'll build these aeroplanes in India. But that is why a domestic defense industry is crucial for us to keep a handle on these costs. And you will see as we go along, we are developing some of our own aeroplanes that require all the disciplines of engineering, of chemical engineering, metallurgy, computers, all that stuff, electronics, everything to come together to deliver these platforms. So what you're seeing is a huge jump in the cost of these aeroplanes. It's often hard for civilians to understand how the defense industry works. The simplest example I can give you from an Air Force perspective is a fighter jet is equal to a Formula One car, and the margin, is very, very less when you have an aircraft that probably is not the best out there. That's the reason we have to buy the best or acquire the best for our armed forces. So in a Formula One race, if you watch Formula One, it's 2/10 of a second, 3/10 of a second. It's the same thing in air combat. When the fighter aircraft is dueling with another fighter jet, then the more modern, the more technology, the better training the pilot has, all of it comes together for the aeroplanes. So because you're young people, you're the future of this country, I want you to get an understanding of the exorbitant costs of defense equipment and how important it is to have our own defense industry, which is able to develop these things at a more affordable cost for us. And that's exactly why we're developing our own aircraft, right? So you will be aware of this. We have the Dhruv helicopter. We started work in the mid 80s. It first flew in 1990. Today we have more than 300 of them flying. We've got the Hansa, which is a trainer aircraft made by NAL. You've got the Saras, again, that's a commercial aircraft made by NAL. You have the Tejas light fighter. We're going to order large numbers of these. We have the intermediate jet trainer, the IJT, that's 2003. You have the light combat helicopter. You have the light utility helicopter. You have the HLT-40. Now, all of these aircraft have a very large contribution from our domestic defense industry, right? All kinds of things, hydraulics, rubber seals, pipes, heat exchangers, there's just enormous amount of things that are being done. Now we discussed this is technology that we began developing in the 80s. What's the future? The future is going to be what you guys will be part of, God willing, if you decide to join or be part of these industries. But you see the Tejas is the aircraft that is second from the top. You see an aircraft with something coming out of its nose. It's a gray colored aircraft with Tejas. I'm sure all of you know how it looks. That's a single seat light aircraft. But this is what we are doing next. This is the advanced medium combat aircraft, a very, very modern aeroplane, a lot of work being done. This is stealthy. It will have, very high-end computing, a very sophisticated cockpit. It's twin engine, and it's completely different from what we've done before. It's also a huge opportunity for Indians looking to be part of such an advanced aircraft program. This is the advanced medium combat aircraft. And this is why I encourage you to come to Aero India if you can. It's every 2 years. We had a large model of this aircraft on display this year. So this is one important project from the defense industry. This is a variant being done for the Indian Navy. This is a twin-engine deck-based fighter. Now, this will launch off an aircraft carrier. It's a very, very difficult technology to master. India is one of a handful of countries worldwide to have an built in the LCA Navy an aircraft that can land and take off from an aircraft carrier. If you're wondering what an aircraft carrier is, anybody who's watched Top Gun 1 or Top Gun Maverick, you will get to see an aircraft carrier and see what fighter aircraft do from that. This is the LCA Air Force Mark II. We spoke about the Tejas, and this is a follow-on, a newer, a more modern, more capable version of the Tejas fighter. So it shows you that our country is growing, is moving ahead with its defense industry. And this is, you saw three helicopters: the Dhruv helicopter, the light utility helicopter, the light combat helicopter, and you will have this, which is the Indian multi-role helicopter. And this will really mark the coming of age of our helicopter industry. Now, all of India's helicopters are designed in Bangalore, but the industry in the south plays such a key role in allowing our industry to move forward. They supply, all the things required to make these helicopters. Here are the facts for you. Our defense industry is growing rapidly. Our defense, production has surged massively. You can see it's 174% growth. We've got 16,000 MSMEs which are emerging as game changers. MSMEs are absolutely vital for the defense industry because they have these very core competencies that they are able to generate and support industrial, efforts. Industrial licenses are also important. If you need to work in the defense industry, you need to get a license from the government of India. And today, a lot of these licenses are being issued. So if you're looking to work for companies in this field, you will find a lot of them. India's defense exports have also rocketed up. 23,622 crore in FY 24-25 as compared to less than 1,000 crore in 2015. All this is phenomenal opportunity for young people. Your country today exports to over 100 nations, and that's really a great achievement. Today, the private sector units, so Hindustan Aeronautics, Bharat Electronics Limited, BEML, a lot of these Indian, we call them defense public sector undertakings, the ordnance factories that we discussed earlier, they account for about 77% of exports. But what's more important is the private sector is 23%, and this number is only going to grow. Now, the Tatas are manufacturing a military aircraft for the Air Force in Gujarat. That's the first time it's ever happened. That's going to be something really good. Just a few days back, they inaugurated a helicopter manufacturing factory in Bangalore. A Karnataka-based company called ACUS is setting up an engine manufacturing facility in Tamil Nadu. So there's lots happening, and you can see the goals that the government has, right? I think it's about, they really have very ambitious targets, and it's being reflected in funding. 50,000 crore in defense exports, right? About 9,000 crore is $1 billion. So you've got about, $5-6 billion worth of defense exports that Indian companies and young people like you can sort of be part of, and take part in this growth. That's not all. There's so much fantastic stuff happening in space as well. India's space sector really has been one of the most amazing success stories. All of you, Sriharikota is quite close. You can drive down, you can register with ISRO to watch to watch a rocket launch. It's very fantastic. I can assure you, as the rocket goes up, you start hearing the sonic booms, bang, 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 it just one after the other. It's quite an amazing experience watching something like this take off. So, please log on to the ISRO website. I think you'll find a page. You're young, you should go and watch something like this, at least once in a lifetime. What's very interesting is the number of startups has grown massively. You have young Indian companies that are doing phenomenal work in the space domain. You've got Dhruva Aerospace, Skyroot, Agnikul, Bellatrix. Many of them are based in Chennai. Many of them are in Tamil Nadu. You've got Pixel Aerospace, which is very close to where I stay here in Bangalore. They make satellites, hyperspectral satellites. The number of space startups has crossed more than 400, right? And the investments are more than $500 million. So India's space economy today is $8.4 billion. Okay, and it's only going to grow with the government targeting 4 to 5 times that number. I think definitely that's something that could likely happen definitely by 2035. So plenty of opportunities for you guys. Please make the most of it. Learn the sector. We've given you a broad overview, but you can always read up a little more. And well, um, I'm cognizant of the time and I didn't want to overrun. So basically, you know, uh, we've come to the end of the talk. I apologize if I've been rattling off a little too fast, but at least one question, if you guys can answer. These are two very, very important individuals. Can anybody identify either of them or both of them? Anybody?
So the one on the right side is Vikram Sarabhai, I guess.
You guessed correct. Excellent answer. Okay. And on the left, anybody? Any guesses? Okay. So you have Dr. Vikram Sarabhai, right? Amazing individual. If you read up, very inspirational figure. On the left is Dr. APJ Abdul Kalam, right? That's him as a young scientist as part of ISRO. All of you know what he's achieved, so much for our nation. I'm hoping that a couple of you young people, we look at your photos 30, 40 years down the line and we say, you know what, we'll ask other people, can you recognize them and look at how much they've done for our country, right? So, if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them for you. But essentially, our defense industry today has grown phenomenally. It's really a time of opportunity for young people. If you're focused with your time, if you're clear that this is something you want to do, the space sector has amazing opportunities. The defense sector also has amazing opportunities. You have some fantastic companies in Chennai. A lot of also your famous, Lakshmi Mills, for example, they do some fantastic work with aviation. You've got data patterns. They do a lot of work for radars. So you have just so much. Machilipatnam has a BEL factory. So there's a lot happening for you. I hope that you young people will um, use whatever insight you gain from this talk to maybe learn more for yourselves, be more curious. And if you don't have any more questions, then I wish all of you all the very best for the future. You live in a India of opportunity. Um, Please don't be timid, take risks, and I'm sure all of you will do very, very well and make your nation proud. Right. I guess I'm done, people. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Atul.
Any questions?
I guess. Uh, Kanishka, over to you then.
Yes. So, as we conclude today's webinar on Indian defense industry, I would like to sincerely thank our esteemed speaker, Mr. Atul Chandra, for his insightful session. Sir, your explanation of aviation, aircraft development, and aeronautical engineering, along with references to the advancement through Indian Space Research Organization, gave us a clear understanding